Hi, welcome to Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. We are in Jefferson City, Missouri State Capitol, and we are going to be talking with the Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court, Mary Russell. She's been on the bench for 20 years. She's a Hannibal native, and we had a lot to talk about her long career and about the law in Missouri. And we'll have our conversation with Chief Justice Russell right after this.
What kind of shows will you see on Muddy River Gems each month? The same award-winning storytelling from Mark McDonald and crew that you enjoyed for nearly 20 years on PBS. Muddy River Gems with host Mark McDonald. A new episode every month online from Muddy River News.
Chief Justice Russell, thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to see you, Bob. Thanks for coming down.
The last time I was here was 20 years ago when you were sworn in.
Can you believe it? I mean, time has flown by, and it just seems like yesterday.
I remember, when we had that conversation 20 years ago, and I remember you were very humbled by the experience, and I'm sure 20 years later that feeling just doesn't change.
You're exactly right. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's something that I never would have dreamed I would have ever been able to achieve in my lifetime. I grew up on a farm south of Hannibal. My dad was a dairy farmer. My mother was a housewife. My biggest ambition was to get a college degree. Maybe work in journalism was maybe one of my first career goals. But the thought of ever being a lawyer, much less a judge, was just beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm very, very fortunate to be where I am today, and have had help from a lot of people, especially back home.
You and I, being Ralls County kids, although you went to Hannibal High and I went to Mark Twain, but we won't get into that. But I was also at the Hannibal High School graduation where you spoke a couple years ago. I had a nephew in the class.
Wonderful.
And you talked a lot about, obviously, growing up there, and you were valedictorian, of course, at Hannibal. And you were talking about, a great message of, basically what you just said here. I never would have thought this, but this just shows you, you're growing up here, you're sitting here in Corf Gymnasium, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And I thought that was a wonderful message to those kids.
Well, thanks for remembering that, because that's what I try to tell a lot of young people that I mentor is dream big. Don't set your sights on being the number 2 or the 3 person. Dream that you want to be the number 1 person in whatever industry or field you want to go into. And there's no reason why you can't. I didn't dream big because A, I was from a rural area. I never thought I could compete with the folks from the bigger cities. And B, I was a girl. And in those days, women just didn't have the employment opportunities that we have today. I mean, I remember when the Hannibal Courier-Post would have in the classified ads a column that said help wanted male and help wanted female. And if you were female, you did not apply for one of the male jobs.
You've talked frequently about your law partner, your mentor, Judge Clayton. And Bob Clayton, when you were hired at his law firm, basically he had some conversation. He basically said, "Well, I think we need to have a girl attorney here." And then you did that, and then you got to practice law in your hometown after you went to Truman State for your undergrad and then graduated from Mizzou. So, what was it like when you were practicing law in your hometown? Because I'm sure there weren't a lot of women doing that then.
There weren't. I think there was one other woman in town at the time, and she was kind of part-time. But it was really fulfilling because I got to come home and work with people that I knew their families. I'd known several generations. My family had been there for several generations. And so it was really wonderful to be able to help others that you knew well. To be able to provide legal assistance to people that didn't have the knowledge and didn't have the education that I did, to help them be able to handle the problems that they might be facing in their life. But back to Bob Clayton for a second. It was not an easy decision for him to hire a woman. In fact, he thought maybe he might be kind of teased by some of the other men in town, and he talked to one of his buddies on the other side of the state from Liberty to see what it was like having a woman in the firm. Can she handle it, and was it going to be okay? And the gentleman he talked to said, go ahead, Bob, it'll be fine. And I'm so glad that Bob was convinced of that, because we had a wonderful, wonderful working relationship and still a great friendship to this day. And he taught me so much that you can't even quantify it.
Because if you hadn't been in Hannibal, you'd have just gone down to St. Louis and ended up being the general counsel for the Cardinals or something, right?
Well, now that would have been okay too.
You would have liked that job, yeah. Huge St. Louis Cardinal fan. We have talked about that over the years as well.
And isn't it sad now?
Yeah, it's just not a lot of fun these days, that's for sure. You mentioned journalism and your role in you working for the Courier-Post, and I think one thing that a lot of journalists appreciate, it seems like the courts have been much more progressive, and they've been much better in just the openness of the information. Now, the cameras in the courtroom thing, sometimes it's still a little here or there, but just as far as getting the information, going to CaseNet in Missouri, going to Judici in Illinois, I spoke with Beth, who's basically your public information officer here, was very helpful in getting us this set up. I'd asked about a case and she looked it up for me and emailed it all to me. I think that has been a wonderful tool, and I want to thank you and all the courts for accepting the fact that, look, this information needs to be more readily accessible.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. CaseNet started long before I got here,
Sure.
2004, and it is really a very unique and progressive tool. Most states across the country still don't have a statewide case management system, and we were probably one of the first in the country. The number of hits that we get per day, I can't even tell you the number now, but it's in the millions. It's such a useful tool, not only for those of us that work in the court system every day, but just for the public to be able to have access to look at files without having to go down to a courthouse or travel across the state to another courthouse. That was a huge step for us to allow more transparency and more accessibility to our court records. And then I also want to add on that just this year, starting in September, our court here at the Supreme Court now has live video streaming of all of our court proceedings.
That's great.
I didn't know if you were aware of that, but we had audio forever. But now you can go to our webpage, click on the link, and you can watch our court live, hearing the oral arguments. And if you miss it live, you want to go see a case from months ago, you can only go back to September, that's when we started it, you can watch it archived too. So we're really, really thrilled about that, and you can step into our courtroom and I'll show you our cameras. Little interesting getting the judges to agree to it, but we have some younger judges now, and all it takes around here, there's 7 of us. The Chief Justice is kind of a weak position. We can't rule and control the court by ourselves, but once we get 4 votes, then things change.
Yeah, and you guys, in speaking with Beth earlier, and I took a quick peek in there, there's been a real effort to renovate, restore the court to its former state, and it really is beautiful.
Yeah, the clerk of our court has a real appreciation for that, and she's been able to work with people to strip off old paint and old wallpaper and find the original stenciling that was on our walls back when the building was built. It was built between 1905 and 1907. Profits of the World's Fair from 1904 was the seed money. And so it's a historic, beautiful building, older than the Capitol. In fact, when the last Capitol burnt, the Senate held its sessions here.
Okay.
So there's a lot of history here. And, back to your original statement to me, I still pinch myself for the opportunity to work here. We're just temporary guardians. We all have to retire when we're 70 if we don't leave earlier than that. And so it's a real privilege and honor.
Again, before you were appointed by Governor Holden in 2004, you were on the Eastern District Court of Appeals here. So you've actually been a judge for 30 years then.
Almost.
Almost 30 years. This state has changed dramatically. And again, Missouri's judges are nonpartisan. But over the years, Missouri was a blue state, but you'd always get a Republican governor or Republican senators, and there was some balance. Now it's predominantly a Republican state. Has the shift in party, does that affect what you do, what the Supreme Court does?
No, not at all. Not at all. We take an oath to follow the laws in our Constitution and obviously then our statutes that are passed by the legislature. And so we're accountable to the laws and to the Constitution. And so we don't make decisions based on what's politically popular, what way the wind is blowing. We have ethics accountability. You know, we are not political creatures. People think we are, but we're not. We have to interpret the words in the statutes and the Constitution as they're written by the legislature, by the people in the Constitution. And sometimes the wording and the facts in the case dictate a result that we personally don't like. Maybe it's letting somebody that's a drunk driver go free because the officer forgot to get a warrant. And so this driver's constitutional right to be free from unreasonable, unwarranted searches and seizures, which is guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment, has been violated. And then we're asked to make, lemonade out of lemons. And we hold our nose because the headlines aren't good. But one of the things I like to do is I like to speak to citizens. I like to go to Rotary clubs, senior citizen centers, high schools, colleges, law schools, and let the audience play judge. I show them the facts in a real case that we had. I show them the statute or the constitutional provision they have to interpret or apply, and ask them, how would you rule? And they come up with the same result, that we hate this. We don't like this, but here's what the words say, or here's people's constitutional rights are more important than anything. We've got to protect people's constitutional rights. So it's a real good illustration for people to see, oh, that's what judges do. We thought they made this stuff up. But any judge in Missouri is happy to go talk to civic organizations or student groups. And I think it's a real opportunity for the public to get up close and maybe behind the scenes look at how laws are interpreted and what courts do. And
the law is it's constantly moving, because this state has recently had referendums regarding abortion, regarding gaming, regarding marijuana. So these laws change, and you and your colleagues have to interpret those laws and how they will be applied,
whether we like them or not.
Yeah, I mean and again, there are a lot of, in this state, when you look at these laws that pass, sometimes when you see a heavy Republican majority in all the statewides, but then you see the abortion issue that basically it makes it legal in Missouri, then it's like, well, you can see that there aren't a lot of single issue voters, but again, that doesn't matter to you. You're sitting there saying, okay, this is what the voters have decided, this is what the public decided, and this is how we will apply that, like you said, like it or not.
We have a great relationship, I think, with the statewide officials. We had the governor over for dinner the other night just to say thank you for a job well done. We've enjoyed working with you, and we've appreciated the judges that you've appointed to all of our courts. I feel like we have a good working relationship with all the officials. I consider them my constitutional partners. Yeah. We all take the same oath, and we're all here trying to do the best jobs we can, and so I don't look at them as any kind of political stripe.
The three branches of government are supposed to be equal. That's how this whole thing was built.
That's right.
And also, you mentioned the statewide office holders. The Attorney General's office isn't in the Capitol. It's here, isn't it?
Yes, by statute, by law, yes. And our Attorney General is a hardworking man, and we have a great relationship with him.
Earlier we had talked about the public, and to talk about in a judge's position, in a politician's position these days, again, while the internet is a great tool for information, it also is a great tool for misinformation. And that's something that you also have to deal with. You have to deal with people who don't like a certain ruling. You have to deal with people who are going to maybe not be pleased with an issue. When we came into this building, as it is with the world these days, we went through security, and we were perfectly happy to do so. That has really changed in the last 20 years as well.
Well, yes, and it's a shame. It's hard for people to understand sometimes our decisions. They don't take the time to read them, and I know people are busy, and sometimes journalists write headlines that are not correct, and people say things that are not correct, and then journalists pick those up and they're repeated. We're prohibited from talking about our cases, and we're gagged in a certain way. So it's frustrating for us because we can't say anything to defend the decisions that we make. We say our opinions speak for themselves. We hope other people can speak up if they see something being said incorrectly. But yes, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there.
You talked about, again, starting your career as a journalist, and I've been doing this for 30 some odd years as well, longer actually. You look at it, and again, what we do at Muddy River News, we report the news impartially. We have conversations with people on all sides of the aisle, and we just try to present the facts to people. But there are a lot of people who put out information, and it's really, lack of a better term, fake news, or they just want to get their point across, and all the news comes from their perspective. So you really have to be careful these days, and whether, again, we want Muddy River News to be a source where people go to for analysis, nonpartisan. Hey, this is just what's happening in Quincy, Hannibal, and everywhere in that 60-mile-ish radius. And again, that's just not the case anymore, because again, as we want to be able to trust public officials, journalists have to be able to be trusted too.
Well, and Bob, you're a real journalist, so you get it. You understand the ethics of journalism, and you understand presenting both sides of every story. And because of your long tenure in this profession, you're a professional. And so I enjoy reading the news on the website from Muddy River News. And I know this is a commercial here.
Thanks. But we'll clip that.
No, but seriously, we don't have a lot of real journalists left.
No, we don't. And again, whether it's that, something else that you've had to deal with along with that is also AI and how the courts are using AI. Talk a little bit about that and how that has also changed how you're conducting business here.
So we really aren't utilizing it. We're still studying it. Sure. There's a lot of good that AI can, I think, eventually do to help all of us in any profession become more efficient with our time and maybe more effective, but there's still some hallucinations out there, lots of incorrect information. When it first started, in November of 22, one of my colleagues came to me and said, we got to start talking about and learning about AI. Well, remember now, I'm from a farm, and I'm thinking, why does he care about artificial insemination? So, okay, I suddenly learned he was talking about artificial intelligence. Okay, now I get it. Okay, yeah. So
we're not breeding cows here.
No, but that's where I was. My background. That's what I thought. So, in any event, I just went into ChatGPT and said, write a 500-word biography of, and then listed my name, and it like a teletype came out with this long narrative, and it said I was born in Kansas City, that my parents were lawyers. That said I went to a college I didn't go to, that I worked in a different town. And so it was a lot of incorrect information. So I would, as an experiment, continue to do that every couple of months to see when they would start to get it right. And the last time I did it, it said she believes in justice. She's a firm defender of all the Constitution provisions. And it was like, could have been written about any judge. Sure. So it was not incorrect, but it wasn't very helpful. But we're taking classes, we're going to seminars, we're learning more about how AI can help not only lawyers in what they do with their practice, but also how it can maybe help and make me more effective for our staff and judges. I was at a meeting recently where I was told, and we've not tried this out or looked at it yet, that some part of AI in conjunction with some of the research engines that we use, electronic research, that you can submit the briefs from a case, you can submit the tape from the oral argument, and you can submit maybe a case or two that you want to make sure is highlighted, and AI will then write an opinion.
Wow. Yeah,
now, I haven't even discussed with my colleagues yet. It's going to blow their mind. Now, what the quality of the product will be, I don't know, but I've certainly used AI to help me with letters of recommendation, with letters of nomination of people for awards, plan a trip. Yeah. And it's not perfect, but you can maybe find a little phrase that, ooh, that's a good snippet, or that'll get me started. It's not totally beneficial, but it can provide a little bit of a help. At least that's the way I look at it right now.
What I cover a lot of public meetings. As a matter of fact, the night before we conducted this interview, I had to cover an Adams County Board meeting where they were passing the levy and electing a new chairman and all these things. So as a practice, sometimes I'll just record the whole meeting, and then I can hit a button on my recording device that gives me basically an AI version of the story.
Wow.
And I look at it and I'm like, well, that's not, I mean, it'd be like a newbie rookie reporter covering it, but it was pretty close.
Wow.
And but again, I'm not using that yet. It's like I recorded it, I took the bites I needed, and I took most of the notes the old school way. I got my recorder sitting up there, but I'm still jotting stuff down. So
well, good for you, because I mean, there's some fake journalism coming out of AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw a story written about me that said I was on the ballot the last time. I was not.
No ballot.
It talked about a particular case that I was involved in, but it was a totally incorrect story, and somebody had put it out there, and I don't know where, if it would ever get picked up, but I think it's going to make it harder then for the consumer of news to be able to determine, you know, what's truth and what's fiction.
Yeah, it is. You have to, it's very hard. And again, with just all the different sources, again, the internet's a wonderful tool, but with all the sources out there on any number of subjects, you just have to be so careful. And we, again, at Muddy River News, we just try to be very thorough, and we make mistakes like everybody else, and we hate it when we do it, and we put our full correction, retraction, whatever. And, you know, and again, dealing with a lot of court situations when you have someone who has done something and they've gone through the process and they've been found guilty or whatever, or then they're found not guilty, and they're like, well, you need to take down all those other stories you wrote before. Well, no, that's still process. That's still what happened. You were found not guilty, but all these things were still a part of the public record. The courts aren't going to go in and strike everything just because you were found not guilty. We can't unring that bell, but we can run a story that says Joe Smith found not guilty of whatever, and we can run that with the same ferocity that we've run the other stories. Now, you're only going to run the one story because it's the final verdict, but that's the best we can do.
Yeah, it's tough.
I don't know how we're supposed to go back and just start deleting old stories. I just don't think that serves anybody any good. So, last thing I want to wrap up with is just the legal profession in general. And you talked about being a young lawyer in Hannibal and making that choice and not going to St. Louis or Kansas City. Hannibal and Quincy and all of us, all the small towns, Mexico, pick them. Jeff City probably not because it is state government, but these small communities are desperate in trying to find attorneys and keep attorneys. What can be done so the Mary Roads, well, you were Mary Roads back then, the Mary Roads of now will decide to stay in a small town and not go to the big city and start practicing law right off the bat?
Yeah, so I think it starts back at our law schools. And I've talked to our dean at the University of Missouri School of Law about how we need to have maybe more programs where law school students can come and listen to attorneys from smaller towns and hear about the virtues of a practice in a small town. I think the monetary opportunities are equal to a firm of a similar size in the metropolitan area. I think that the opportunities in the courtroom for your professional development are better. The chances of getting into a courtroom, being able to handle a case more independently without having to always be the understudy. I think there's more opportunities there. I mentor students, and one of the students that I mentored at Mizzou a few years ago was from Northeast Missouri. And when it came time for her to graduate, I said, have you thought about looking at a law firm, you know, in Hannibal? She was a couple counties away. And no, not really. And so I made some suggestions to her, made a call or two. She's now working at a firm in Hannibal, and she loves it.
Great.
And so I think you're right. We've got to work with our young people who are from there. They're the ones that have the most knowledge of what the community's like and more logically connected to family and friends there, that they're desirous to come back. And not that I'm excluding people from other urban parts of the state.
Sure.
But I thought it was a wonderful experience. It was a great opportunity to get involved in civic activities in the community. I was president of the Hannibal Chamber. I was involved in Industrial Council, United Way, lots of women's clubs. Rotary didn't have women in it yet, so I wasn't in Rotary. But
that's changed, of course.
Yes, of course. I was president of the Jefferson City Rotary. So it's just a very, very, very fulfilling professional career and personal life, especially to be close to your family and you're not that far from Cardinal baseball.
You're really not, and that's when I was in trying to hire young people, whether it was in my previous life as a news director or whatever. I always said, look, come here. This is like grad school. Come here for a couple years. If you like it, you stick around, great. If not, go to the big city. And I think that you really want to sell that part of it, because you never know if they're going to fall in love with the job or fall in love with somebody or do whatever, and you might have a chance to get a really good employee and keep them for a long, long time. And I think that, in my friends who are involved with the law firms back home, that's definitely been the case, where they have tried to incentivize and do the things that you've suggested to try to get. And again, if you're a kid from Perry, maybe Hannibal or Quincy is the big city for now. Now, when I first went to the zoo, I'm like, I'm going to here, I'm going to St. Louis, I'm going to ESPN, I'm going to do this and that. And then you meet a girl, you get married, you have kids, and you decide to stick around. That's just what happens.
Yeah, yes. And, and the legal deserts exist all throughout our
legal
state.
Legal deserts, news deserts, yes.
And even nationwide. But while I've been chief these past 18 months, I've been traveling the state, visiting every circuit in the state on an appreciation and thank you tour to our court employees who are behind the scenes and are on the front line and don't get the credit and don't get the thanks that they deserve. And I've seen a lot of legal deserts in our state. I think it's Sullivan County in northern Missouri. There's no attorneys there to be the prosecutor.
Yeah.
A woman from the adjoining county comes over during the day and is their prosecutor. I was in New Madrid County last week. They're very short. It's true everywhere, and it is worrisome. And I don't have the magic bullet on how to fix it, other than let's start maybe early while they're in law school and show them their employment opportunities.
Chief Justice Mary Russell, I want to thank you for the time. I know you're very busy, but I appreciate the chat. And again, thank you for your service. And again, best of luck. And again, it's just great to see you again.
Well, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming down here, and please feel free to come anytime. Our courtroom is open to the public. We're happy to have anybody come see what we do, and happy to have invitations to come speak to any groups or organizations in Northeast Missouri about what the courts do.
I'd like to thank Chief Justice Russell for the conversation today. I'm sure all of Northeast Missouri is very proud of this Ralls County girl and her 20 years on the Missouri Supreme Court, as she is currently in her second term as Chief Justice. That's all the time we have for today. I'm Bob Goff with Muddy River News. We'll catch you next time.